happy Museums and Galleries Month to everyone. This is Carlo Mardawana, and I welcome you to our program, Pinto, a 360-degree virtual experience tour. It's a beautiful Wednesday afternoon here at Pinto, and I would like to greet our audience here and those who are joining us from different time zones. October couldn't be more apt as the Philippines celebrates the Museums and Galleries Month. To join the festivities, the Department of Foreign Affairs, through the Office of Public and Cultural Diplomacy, partnered with the most Instagram museum in the Philippines, a museum based in Antipolo, Rizal, the Pinto Art Museum, and in support to the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, or NCCA, the department echoes this year's theme for the Museums and Galleries Month, Embracing Uncertainty, Showcasing Solidarity, Hope, and Recovery. We have a panel discussion, an art workshop, and a virtual tour lined up for you today, all of them emphasizing the power of art as a tool to unite, heal, and inspire. This online program will show you a different way of experiencing the Pinto Art Museum through a gamified 360-degree virtual tour and give you a glimpse of how rich contemporary art is here in the Philippines. You'll definitely pick a thing or two from the panel discussion and the art workshop as well. We have so much in store for you, so let's begin. To open the program officially, let us hear from the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Enrique A. Manalo.
NCCA Chairman Rene Escalante, Dr. Hoven Quanang of the Pinto Art Museum, colleagues from the Department, Philippine Foreign Service posts and consular offices, our audience here in the Philippines and abroad, it is my pleasure to greet you a happy Museum and Galleries Month. This annual observance seeks to awaken our national consciousness and pride in Filipino culture and heritage. The theme of this year's celebration, Embracing Uncertainty, Showcasing Solidarity, Hope, and Recovery, highlights the vital role of museums and galleries as cultural touchstones in a rapidly changing world. It also recognizes our heritage, culture, and art forms as essential ingredients of nation building. Art has played a major role in our country's cultural diplomacy. Through our 94 Foreign Service posts, our Office of Public and Cultural Diplomacy, and our partner agencies, we have shown the international spotlight on Filipino artistic talent. It is through the exceptional works of Filipino artists that we present the history, vision, and aspirations of the Filipino people to the rest of the world. As the Department of Foreign Affairs strives to enhance our national image overseas by showcasing the rich and diverse Filipino culture and heritage, it is also our hope that Filipinos at home and abroad will be inspired to explore their own culture and realize the transformative power of the arts. This is the primary goal of the upcoming panel discussion on Philippine contemporary art and cultural diplomacy art workshop and virtual museum experience. On behalf of the DFA, I would like to extend my deep appreciation to the Pinto Art Museum, not only for being our partner in this special event, but more importantly, for its unwavering commitment to bringing diverse cultures and communities together through the arts. In closing, let me offer my very best wishes for this year's commemoration of Museum and Galleries Month, and may you all have a meaningful and memorable virtual tour.
Thank you, Secretary Manalo, for supporting this cultural diplomacy endeavor. Indeed, art anchors life and is one of the ways with which we find our bearing in the world. Now, let's take a quick look at the hip and thriving contemporary art museum in Antipolo, Rizal that houses a well-curated collection of contemporary artworks from both emerging and established Filipino artists. Join me as we get a glimpse of the Pinto Art Museum. Think of it as a teaser for the virtual tour later.
Right in the middle of Antipolo's undulating hills lies a unique, beautiful gallery that celebrates Philippine contemporary art, aptly called Pinto, which means door in the vernacular. This art museum sits on more than a 2-hectare property located within a gated community. With its Mediterranean-inspired architecture, lush gardens with endangered and indigenous trees and plants, vast galleries and exhibit spaces, and collections of contemporary art from both upcoming and established Filipino artists. Pinto Art Museum is a masterpiece unto itself, the result of months of brainstorming and years of building and expansion. Well-designed white halls and structures house a wide, carefully curated collection of paintings, illustrations, sculptures, and installations from Philippine artists.
About the late 1980s, as a result of the democratic space that we obtained as a result of the revolution, I heeded the call of citizens in Antipolo to plan out on what we can do as a people to make Antipolo a unique place to stay in. After so much brainstorming, we agreed that Antipolo, considering its history, will have to be a center for art, culture, and ecology. We promoted art and culture, and that's the reason why we were able to attract these young artists. I started to invite them to come over to this place, which I call El Refugio. El Refugio meaning it's a refuge from my daily activity as a doctor. And every Sunday, they would come and sketch. After many weeks, I really found out that the body of works were worth an exhibit. That's when we started to come out with the exhibits here, at the back of the house. And I invited a lot of people who were friends of mine who might be interested to buy some of their paintings. That's how the careers of artists who are well known now came about. And we have names like Elmer Borlongan, Marcos Tignani, Antonio Leanio, Manuel Garibay, Jose Santos, Jim Orencio, Ferdi Montemayor, Erwin Leanio. There were 15 of them. The beautiful part of it is that these artists who are very, very sensitive to the human condition were actually depicting through their art the socio-economic condition of the Philippines at that particular time. The relationships of the church, politics, and the social classes.
Pinto Art Museum was born at the start of the new millennium, after a New Year's Eve celebration where Dr. Kwanang and several artists were toasting the new beginning of a new century.
And the artist said, what will we call it? And we said, Pinto. And I said, why Pinto? Pinto is a door to the new century, a door to the new millennium, a door which will open to new ways of expressing art, new ways of people coming in to enjoy and be educated with art, and a door where people can converge to be able to discuss the importance of art. So that's why the name Pinto came about.
With a vision and a dream, the good doctor started accumulating pieces from different local artists. It came to a point that he had collected so much artwork that his house didn't have enough walls and space for all of them. This opened doors for Dr. Kwanang to make huge steps towards his vision. And on December 25 of 2010, Pinto Art Museum's doors opened, showcasing and celebrating the works of those who will become the Philippines' most important artists.
And I'm very happy that a lot of people from all walks of life come to Pinto to be able to enjoy nature and at the same time to encounter art. I think even if they don't understand the art in the beginning, they're being able to go ahead and experience it. It's already a plus in terms of their particular experience. Art is alive in the Philippines. I've never seen such burgeoning of art in the last years that I've been into this. Pinto is an amalgam of many art practices. It can range from classical almost to abstract. And the subject matter that is being tackled is also varied from one gallery to the next. But most of all, I think the experience in coming to Pinto is something that is total. It is an experience. A Pinto experience will expose a newcomer to Pinto to a different world.
Pinto is a museum, a celebration of Filipino contemporary art. But it's also so much more than that. It's a refuge and a place of healing, a venue for people to converge and discuss the importance of art, to relax and breathe in the beauty of its environment. It's a place that connects art and nature, culture and ecology, history and the present. It's a door to the extraordinary world of Philippine art.
That was just an overview of Pinto Art Museum, the vision and history behind it, and a look at some of the magnificent works of art that you can experience there. I'm sure many of you are excited for the gamified virtual experience of Pinto Art Museum later, which, by the way, you can immerse fully with a VR headset through your phone, desktop, laptop, tablets, and even in Oculus VR. Exploring and learning about art has never truly been just at your fingertips. Now, let us move on to the next part of the program, a panel discussion with the theme, The World is an Archipelago, Philippine Art and Cultural Diplomacy. We are fortunate to have with us today two respected names in the art world who will share with us their knowledge of Philippine contemporary art and its role in shaping society and in cultural diplomacy. If you have any questions, just send them via the QA feature or chat. Just make sure to mention the panelists to whom your question is addressed along with your question. So we'll open that a bit later. For those who are joining us via Facebook and YouTube, you can also send your questions there too. Our community managers will collect your questions to be asked during the Q&A session. Today, we have the curator of the Vargas Museum in Manila and an art professor from the University of the Philippines in Diliman. He is also the curator of the Philippine Pavilion at the Venice Biennale in 2015 and the artistic director of the Singapore Biennale 2019, Mr. Patrick D. Flores. We also have here today, all the way from Portugal, the head of programs and audience engagement of the Lopez Museum and Library and co-curator of all of us present. This is our gathering, the exhibit of the Philippine Pavilion at the Venice Biennale this year. She also served as president of the Museum Foundation of the Philippines, Ms. Yael Boromay. Thank you for joining us, Patrick and Yael. I'm sure our participants from all over the world are excited to learn and hear your thoughts about contemporary art. So first off, cultural diplomacy can take on many forms and expressions. In the art world, how is cultural diplomacy enacted? What are its usual forms and what are its primary aims? Perhaps Yael may want to answer this question first.
Okay, good afternoon, Patrick. Good afternoon, Carlomar. Thank you for inviting us to be part of this panel today. To your question, I guess, what are the normal forms of cultural diplomacy in the art world? I think the ones that are most visible to the public are exhibitions in museums and art galleries. And also performances by musical or dance performances. Film screenings, participation in film festivals is also quite a visible sign of Philippine culture abroad. On a less visible level to the public, I think there are artist residencies which allow artists and curatorial residencies which allow for more personal and personal interaction and deeper engagement with the artistic community.
All right, thank you, Yael. How about Patrick? What's your take on the question?
Thank you, Carlo Mar, for the invitation, and it's good to see you, Yael. It's seems to be a beautiful morning in Lisbon. Is it morning?
Yes.
Huh? Yeah, it's beautiful light, no? Streaming into the living room. But anyway, I think Yael has already sketched out the main forms of cultural diplomacy as it relates to our field, the visual arts. But I'd like to say that as curators, we are also diplomats in many ways. So curatorship is a kind of diplomacy too. We are engaged in diplomatic functions like representation or translation of local culture on let us say international platform or stage and so on and so forth. So maybe we can also look at a curatorship as a kind of diplomacy so that we don't create that like strict opposition between cultural diplomacy and curatorial work. Aside from the things that Yael mentioned, I must say that scholarship on art and culture should be part of the cultural diplomacy framework, like the idea of a Philippine studies, right? I think supports the understanding of Philippine art and culture all over the world. So I think cultural diplomacy should also build up a discursive infrastructure, meaning ways of understanding, ways of analyzing, or ways of cherishing this dynamic culture from the Philippines. No? So I'm a bit biased towards it because I'm an academic. So, and in relation to my curatorial work, discursive production is important. And finally, maybe we can also talk about a kind of diplomacy that is a bit tricky or contentious, and this has something to do with the repatriation of objects. No? This maybe we can say it's a relic diplomacy. No? And this is important in a post-colonial, decolonial context in which post-colonial societies would like to reclaim stuff that have been taken away from their cultural context, physically. So they want them back. No? So this is a tricky situation, but I think the test case was the bells of Balangiga. No? So we can look at that as a case study of how we can further pursue efforts towards relic diplomacy.
All right, that's a very interesting take in terms of the invisible infrastructure that goes on behind or beyond exhibitions, the more tangible forms that we encounter, say, in gallery spaces or museum spaces, the constant negotiations that we need to establish with other diplomatic players, if I may call them that, in terms of expanding the notion of what our heritage, for instance, that's also located in different parts of the world, and some of them through means that are not, you know what I mean, that are not open and that are not accessible. So let's move on to the next question, and this concerns largely with your roles at the Vargas Museum, for instance, and also at the Lopez Museum, wherein you are the heads of this respective institutions. So how does cultural diplomacy happen within these spaces? Because I'm thinking there's a more institutional connection or linkages. It's like institution to institution kind of thing already. Could you elaborate on that, perhaps, Yael?
To clarify, I'm not the head of our institution.
All right.
Not
That,
yet, not
Director
yet.
Sandy Vargas.
yeah.
Yeah.
But in terms of our engagements with international museums, we have the Lopez Museum has engaged mostly on the level of assisting in putting together international exhibitions through loans of our artworks and assisting other Filipino institutions prepare their artworks to be sent abroad for exhibitions. We have a very strong conservation department that that studies the effects on artworks that are in the Philippines, that effects that travel has on them. So we have been currently, we have been working with the works of Pasita Abad that will be traveling around America for a traveling exhibition there. The works of Fernando Sobel that are going to the Prado this month, actually, and the show is opening next month. So our current participations have been with our current engagements have.
All right. All right. Thank you, Yael. Patrick.
Yeah. The Vargas Museum has worked with cultural institutions from different countries like the Japan Foundation or the Goethe Institute, and so on and so forth. So the diplomacy takes place in terms of these exchanges, no? Between institutions through largely exhibition making, but also workshops and publications have also been have also been made possible through these exchanges. So we are, for instance, developing a exhibition program in December with the Republic of Croatia. So we are usually working under cultural agreements, no? Between the countries, and if there is a cultural agreement, then the Vargas, for instance, can seek the support of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, because many of these agreements have not been activated, no? So it's just a matter of activating these agreements. I'm sure there are many agreements because every state visit will yield at least one agreement on culture. But it is, we wonder if these agreements are really, activated in a meaningful way. So I think diplomacy, cultural diplomacy, is one way to actively mobilize the potential of agreements, no? Cultural agreements between two countries and between the institutions, no? But what is beautiful about cultural diplomacy is that oftentimes it bypasses institutions. So there are increasingly like people-to-people contact, peer-to-peer, more lateral, more horizontal exchanges that are made possible by artists, no? Artists from different countries, or projects between curators, for instance, so they don't have to pass through official channels for them to produce something together, no? So this is, I think, a kind of cultural diplomacy that need not be under the surveillance of governments, no? But also feed into the general atmosphere of cultural exchange. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for your answers. So it's pretty clear that organizing events and exhibitions, it takes resources. What are the resources that you need to make this happen? What are the things that transpire behind the scenes, so to speak, to make these occasions for engagement and collaboration possible?
Obviously, it's the But there is, of course, the question of funding.
Mhm.
I think the funding is there, but sometimes the bureaucracy is so thick that it's difficult to penetrate. No, I mean the procedures are quite difficult to penetrate, but I think the money is there, no, for certain things to happen. An important thing also is human resource. I think as cultural developments pick up now, I mean at a more brisk pace, we have to develop human resources. And I think this is becoming a problem now. Very few people are, are maybe ready to take on important positions in the cultural scene. No? So some are stretched out, no, because the successor generation is not yet ready to to step up. No? So I think we have to develop the pool of human resources. And then I think finally to mobilize the Filipino communities abroad to support diplomatic efforts. No? The soul of the diplomatic initiative is the support of the community. No? So I think that we always have to keep their participation in mind whenever we do something abroad. And finally, maybe sustained follow through. I noticed that there are occasional spectacles that are just that, no, occasional spectacles. Now there is no follow through or a sustained exchange that happens over time. And I think that we should invest in that sustained exchange over time.
All right. I remember the engagement of the UP Vargas Museum with the Japan Foundation, for instance, that has been going on for quite some time, right?
For 10 years. The curatorial development workshop, which is I think one of the longest workshops on curatorial training in the region. Yeah.
How about you, Yael? Funding wise, of course, it's I think the most pronounced issue here. But aside from that, what else are the resources needed to enact these points of conversation, collaborations, just to start it? Perhaps also within the background or against the background of the technological the technology that we are currently exploring now, given the fact that it has been an instrumental part of our daily lives during the pandemic.
I have to agree. Allow me to agree with Patrick about the value of consistency in our current engagements. I think there are huge spectacles sometimes of exhibitions abroad, but knowing that the Philippines is going to show up year after year in a particular platform, for example, the Venice Biennale, does a lot to establish not only our credibility, but also allow us to develop those ties with the international art community, that sense of consistency. So I truly hope that the Philippines will continue to be in the Venice Biennale. And I think that this consistency and constancy of engagement can also be enhanced through, as you mentioned, through technology. We now have the ability to communicate and to create conferences and symposia online. Over the pandemic, we have been very fortunate because we've managed to, together with Patrick, we managed to organize museum conferences where we've invited international panelists to speak to the Filipino museum community. These invitations may have been difficult to extend because of funding or lack of funding to bring them in. in normal times where we would have had to fly everybody in, accommodate them, and all the expenses associated with that. But the pandemic taught us to use the tools that we have in order to, I guess, more widely disseminate information and knowledge that we have access to.
Both of you have actually answered my next question. Why is it important to showcase Philippine art on international platform? What I'm getting is the representation is already there. So what is more paramount, perhaps, is the constancy and the sustainability of those efforts. Considering that we are on a streak, and like the challenges, of course, of in Yael's case, for instance, creating a show against the background of a pandemic. So as curators of the Philippine Pavilion at the Venice Biennale, what were some of the insights that you had, particularly of audience engagement, and are there ways to kind of replicate that at the home front?
Well, the Venice Biennale is as a long run, no? So it's I think 5 to 6, no?
Now 7.
Now 7, no? So that is a challenge, no? And that is also one of the benefits of being in Venice, no? The presence of the exhibition runs across 5, 6, 7 months, no? So there are lots of things that can be done, no, within that period, and it's also a curatorial challenge how to sustain a pavilion across that period, no. So as curators, we have to think about the program, the discursive program, or the education program, or the public program. For the exhibition. So curatorial work is not just exhibition making. No? It is also developing a cycle of activities around the exhibition. So this is one insight, no, that I was able to get as I curated the Venice Biennale, the Philippine Pavilion in 2015. So I remember that in I think August, no? We opened in I think March, and then in August we had a collateral project involving David Medalla, no? So this is not really just an incidental or ancillary event. It's central, no? These activities should be seen as equivalent also to the pavilion. No? They offer a different entry point, no, into the discourse of the pavilion, which can also be independent of the original discourse of the pavilion. So I think these things should be optimized. No? The possibilities of a robust and dynamic programming around an exhibition, that curatorial work should not just be confined to exhibition making, but should develop different aspects of the ecology, of art and culture.
Thank you, Patrick. Any insight, Yael, with regard to the audience at the Biennale this year?
I have to admit, I think we were lucky. The Venice Biennale is a great place to showcase your art because people who are coming to it really want to see contemporary, are really interested in seeing contemporary art already. You're not dragging people in to see your pavilion. So there is interest and engagement. In the time that we were there, people would actually spend time in the pavilion, come up to us and ask questions. And I think we also benefited from the fact that people were dying to see art in person after 2 years of seeing everything virtually. So there was a lot of dynamic exchange, I think, between the curators and the artists, especially in the opening days. Everyone wanted to see each other's pavilions and had discussions about what was ongoing.
That's pretty prominent actually in the identity of the Biennale, right? The symposia, the talks, the walkthroughs, the educational component, they're really interwoven into the DNA of the Biennale. And I'm seeing small efforts of that here, like even like a commercial gallery, for instance, perhaps may do like an artist walkthrough or may do like an online an interview with the artist, just for us to have a more discursive exchange with regard to from the creative process to the production of work itself, because these are the things that are not necessarily articulated by the works that you see in front of you. So hopefully that becomes really more pronounced and in fact second nature if someone's doing an exhibition, even or despite the fact that it's in a commercial space, perhaps it's more needed there because that's one of those nodes that may still be activated. Let's move on to the next question. Would you say that the Philippines has set its mark effectively in the international arena? What are some of the things that we still need to address in order to make this more viable and pronounced?
That's a big question, Carlo Mar. But maybe just to face it from a specific angle. No? I was recently in New York for a course organized by the Museum of Modern Art and the Columbia Business School. No? And maybe my experience in New York would highlight the presence of the Philippines, no? In different ways. No? So first, the MoMA has a new hang of the collection. Mm-hmm. So it's more inclusive, more global, belatedly perhaps, but it's here. It's also more dynamic. Of course, you still see the mainstays like the Les Musées d'Avignon or Starry Night, but they are juxtaposed with, maybe an art from Japan. And it was great to see Alfonso Osorio already hanging at the MoMA. No? So Alfonso Osorio was born in the Philippines and is I think we should claim him as a Philippine artist. So he did, of course, the Angry Christ in Negros Occidental. No? So that is a presence, no? that we can try to explore further through cultural diplomacy, and it's there already at MoMA. And quite close to the MoMA, of course, is the Philippine Center, right? Mm-hmm. On I think for Fifth Avenue. Yeah. So it is a space that is very central, very close to MoMA, very close to tourists, and so on and so forth. So I think we should invest more intellectually in the development of and the curatorial development of that space, no? Philippine Center, where the consulate is. Also in New York, recently, Silver Lens, the commercial art gallery in Manila, opened a branch in Chelsea area. So this is really a watershed moment, no? For Philippine art to have a local gallery in New York, no? So again, that is a node, no? So you have Osorio in MoMA, you have Philippine Center on Fifth, and then you have Silver Lens in Chelsea, and then recently also in Newark Museum there was a retrospective. Newark is close to New York, no? But there's a retrospective of Carlos Villa, a Filipino-American, very important, seminal contemporary artist. So that creates a strong resonance for the Filipino-American artistic community. No, so you have a retrospective like that, and I think the Philippines could have intervened more in supporting an initiative like the retrospective of Carlos, who influenced a lot of people in San Francisco and beyond, no? Through his practice in art and also in teaching. No? So I'm sure there are other things, no, that were happening related to Filipino artists or Philippine art, but these are some of the things that like constellated while I was in New York. No, so that kind of thing, I'm sure it happens in Paris or in Berlin, and you can make the same constellations too. So Philippine art is present. No, it's for the cultural diplomacy apparatus to find a way to intervene and support it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Patrick. You mentioned something about the engagement of the Lopez Museum with the estate of Fernando Zabel.
Currently the estate of Pasita Abad, because she's going to have an exhibition that will travel around North America later this year, next year. So we are helping to prepare the works of the estate and our work and the works from the Lopez Museum that will travel to the States. But I'd like to build on what Patrick was saying about Filipino artists being present abroad already. Like, for example, this year alone, we have artists participating in Documenta in Germany and the Istanbul Biennale. Our Filipino artists seem to be all over the world on that personal level as artists, not necessarily brought by the country, but by the connections that they've made. They've been invited by curators, and this is really something that the embassies and I guess cultural diplomats can build on. They're already there. You just need to activate those connections. But I also wanted to highlight the importance of the achievements of individuals who are very accomplished in their fields. And Patrick's not going to toot his own horn, but Patrick is very active internationally. I mean, Patrick has been artistic director of the Singapore Biennale. Which really places us in front and center in international art conversations. And he has been a consultant for many museums abroad, not just for Philippine art, but for Southeast Asian art and his curatorial scholarship. And so he has managed to open doors for other curators and for Philippine artists to be explored by these institutions, to participate in conferences abroad. So that level of engagement of Patrick with international institutions does a lot for cultural diplomacy. So to his point of, we need to develop also the human resources to step up to that level as well.
Thank you, Yael. Now the chat box is open for your questions. So there's a question here from Mercedita de Jesus to Sir Patrick and Ma'am Yael. Recently, the PCG Milan sponsored our group exhibit entitled 3 Women, 3 Stars last September in Milan at Iconica Gallery. Do you think we, OFW artists, could also ask assistance from the government and other private entities so we could enter into big exhibitions and art contests, since we all know that joining these events entail also funding considering the high cost of participation fees and other expenses?
I think it's a question for the DFA, no? Or NCCA in terms of access to funding, no? But I think there is funding, but how to access it is another, story. It's usually through reimbursements. And I mean, how that's why you are looking for funding, because you don't have money. But anyway, uh, uh, if the government cannot readily support with funding, it can, I think, support in other ways. No? So I think this is uh, the thing to explore. What are these other ways? No? Like maybe just presence maybe in the opening goes a long way. Also, maybe organizing events with the Filipino community in the embassy, or maybe sponsoring a talk in the embassy or the consulate. I mean, these things are, will go a long way in supporting. No? Although even if you don't give like logistical support, you can support the initiatives of OFW artists, artists from the Philippines in other ways. No? So I think we should explore these other ways. No? If we cannot readily offer money. Yeah.
You want to add to that, or?
Yes, okay. Maybe they can also assist Filipino artists by connecting them with the cultural institutions of those countries, and I assume that maybe embassies and foreign posts have access or connections with the press, people in publications that can highlight these exhibitions, so that Philippine culture is more seen abroad. And I think even that Philippine culture is seen makes a big impact also on the Filipino communities where they are. We're so good as a people at assimilating and fitting in that it feels good when Filipino culture is highlighted and showcased in your host country.
All right, thank you for that. So let's move on to the next question. This one is from Anna Pendry. I saw the installation of mirrors by Mark Justiniani in the Philippine Pavilion at Venice Biennale, I think in 2019. I was so proud and amazed by his work. Can some of these kinds of installations that are being sent to these prestigious events be seen also locally in the Philippines, so that local audience can also enjoy and appreciate them? And better yet, if they can be installed in our museums, such as the National Museum for permanent exhibit.
I think that, I'm sure Yael will agree with me that the Philippine Pavilion project in Venice always has this effort to stage the exhibition in Venice in the Philippines. So for instance, the 2015 exhibition in Venice was restaged twice in the Philippines. One at Vargas Museum and the other one in Benilde, College of St. Benilde. So same with the architecture pavilions. They have been restaged in the Philippines. And I'm sure Yael's will be restaged in the Philippines too. And there was an exhibition of Kidlat Tahimik, the Crystal Palace, this year in Madrid under the auspices of Reina Sofia. And this week, I think this Saturday, it will be restaged at the National Museum. So there are efforts to always translate or curate exhibitions abroad, and for the local audience to also experience. But not every time, because it's expensive, to restage those things. But there have been efforts.
Yeah, is there like a venue now that's being prepared that will stage or host the exhibition now at Venice?
We're still working on the Manila venue for the exhibit, but we're also hoping to take the exhibit to Iloilo because that's where the that's where the idea for the project originated. And we, being Jerry Tan, Pepperette, we all strongly believe in the need to engage with the regions outside of Manila, to bring them into, to converse with them, because that is where the idea originally came from. And there's quite an active art scene now in Iloilo, and we thought it might be a good idea to show it in a museum there.
Mm-hmm. And they have a very good contemporary art museum there already, in Iloilo City. There's another question here. What might future cultural diplomacy look like in the metaverse? So perhaps in terms of the conversations about NFTs and AI generated works. So how would the future of cultural diplomacy inhabit these spaces?
Quite hard to speculate on that, but diplomacy should follow the lead of the material. So if the material is AI or NFT, then I'm sure that diplomacy can build its strategy around the material. So let's not have a prefabricated program of cultural diplomacy to impose on the material. Let's study the DNA of the material, and from there we can propose the most feasible framework for cultural diplomacy to support that specific material. But I think now we can maybe improve our websites. If we want access to the digital world, then I think more interesting, more exciting websites from embassies.
Yeah.
Maybe or microsites that are specific to culture. Maybe we can develop that. I mean, it's not really an extraordinary idea, but I think it will go a long way if we have, exciting websites.
In short, yun muna yung unahin.
Wala pa yata yun. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I agree with Patrick. We can use the current resources that we have and enhance them. There are good ongoing projects that highlight Philippine culture, such as the project that SOAS is a part of, Christina One, the artifacts from Philippine museums and collections across Europe. They're making them available online. They're also developing a library project where, when the British invaded, a lot of the books from the library of San Agustin in Intramuros was taken and dispersed. So SOAS is working with, for one, the Lopez Museum, because we have one of the books that was taken and it's back at the Lopez Museum, and with other, I'm not sure which university in the States, but another university in the States, to bring together the materials from this library and create an online resource for people to see what the original contents of the library was. I think this is a great example of being able to use the technology that we have now to pull together material that would otherwise be impossible to bring together again.
I just want to read this comment from Rowan Carino. It's not a question, but she just wants to report what's happening in Jordan. So, by the way, we have viewers all the way from Qatar, Bahrain, and also the Netherlands. So, just talk about, this is the multiverse actually, as we speak, the multi localities as we speak. So, hello from Jordan. We are a group of Filipino artists here. It's not a question, but just wanted to share our art activities here in Jordan. Just most recently, we painted the mural in one of the well-known Filipino streets in one of the city here, which is Aman. We showcase our Filipino cultures like painting, our traditional flowers, symbolic icons like the kalesa and sari manok. Our purpose was to unite the community regardless of their age, race, and culture, which became successful. We're now planning to do a forthcoming exhibit this December. Thank you and best regards. Mabuhay po tayong mga Pinoy. And this connects to what Yael has mentioned, this efforts that you could establish on the community level could go a long way in articulating our lived experiences as Filipinos, as expatriate Filipinos living in from Manhattan to Milan to Mumbai or to wherever. So that's good to know that something like this is actually being activated in Amman, Jordan. There's a question here, which I think, I don't know how you will answer this. Who are the rising Filipino contemporary artists to watch out for?
Yeah. You know, if we answer that, we'll get into trouble. So I stay out of trouble.
My suggestion would be to go to museums and galleries and explore your own locales to see who's out there.
Yeah, and a few of them are actually their works are actually at the Pinto Art Museum. So you're free and welcome to come here and check out their works. So on that note, thank you, Patrick and Yael, for spending your day with us. It's been a fruitful discussion. We overtimed for like 5 minutes, but that's okay. So still many questions and so many things to unpack. But thank you for spending this day with us.
Thank you, Carlo Mar.
Yeah. Thank you, Carlo Mar.
Thank you. So again, thank you so much to our speakers for sharing with us a wealth of information about Philippine contemporary art and culture. And so it has been an enriching afternoon to learn just how lively the art scene in the Philippines is and to witness how it continuously evolves with the time and environment. Now, to make us more immersed in art, keep us inspired, and see how powerful art can be, let us proceed to the workshop of our guest artist. We present to you Everyday Tales-capes with Mr. Jejo Jimenez.
A former athlete and organic farmer, artist Gerardo or Jejo Jimenez has always found inspiration in his work, be it in stunning table and urbanscapes, still life sceneries in restaurants, or exquisite floral arrangements. Even before establishing Malipayan Farms, this gardener turned full-time farmer was already tapping into his creative side. Back in the day, he would join professional artists and spend an afternoon each week painting. While Jejo traded paintbrushes for gardening tools when his own family started growing, he rekindled his passion for art in 2015 and hasn't stopped painting since. Using watercolor as his main medium, Jejo translates his experiences into carefully rendered paintings and sketches. From scenes from his travels to meticulously prepared table settings to the beautiful interiors of top restaurants and memories of meals with loved ones.
Watercolor's transparency helps achieve a luminosity that for me stands out among the available mediums. And that is why my favorite medium is watercolor. How does one arrange seemingly disparate objects into something that would be considered a work of art? That is really the exercise, the task of a still life painting. Here in this table, we have all these things from pottery to utensils to fabric to flowers. And the task of the artist is really to put them in a certain order, an arrangement which would attract the eye. It is also called the composition. The way I would describe composition is basically an arrangement of the major shapes. It is something that would attract the viewer even from afar, even before they see the details of your painting. They're already attracted by it because of the arrangement of shapes. And that is really the composition. Once we have finalized the arrangement that I will use for the still life painting, the next stage I will have is the initial sketch. This basically becomes the map for the whole painting. The nice thing about still life painting is you control everything. Your objects do not move. They will stay there for the whole time that you paint them. When you start a drawing, the important thing is to put your major shapes right away on your paper. Because you have to move quickly, you have to figure out right away the position of each element in your painting. The major shapes, the major objects in this arrangement are the plates and the potteries. As I'm drawing also, I get a sense what are the lightest areas or the highlights. That is where the light strikes the object. And I make a note of that because watercolor is a transparent medium. You cannot paint a lighter color over a darker color. It will just result in that area becoming darker. In watercolor, if you know your highlights, you have to take note of that because the way to keep that highlight is not to paint over it. And you will use the white of the paper to create that light or that highlight. I feel I have a drawing that's complete enough and defined enough to go to the painting stage. I mentioned that since it's a transparent medium, I have to start from light to dark. And the first stage of painting is really to establish my highlights or the light areas. So I want to set them. I mix first the colors in my palette so that I get the kind of effect I want. The thing also with watercolor is that when your pigments are wet, they will tend to bleed into each other. I'm trying to mix the initial colors that I want to appear so that once I start painting, I can draw from them immediately. I wet the paper first so that the pigment will flow freely. I have to make sure parts I will not paint on remain dry so that pigment will not seep into them. By putting the water, I'm able to more or less lead the pigment later to where I'd want them to go. There's no pigment yet. It's just pure water. If I do it this way, when I put the watercolor, it will spread more evenly. There'll be more fluidity. As I'm doing this, the initial parts that I had wet are starting to dry already, so I have to take that into account. The thing that fascinates me with painting is really how I see light and shadow in the subject. For me, it is fun to try to capture that. Also for me, it has added meaning that the light of your paper is actually already there. And the task is not to diminish it, but to preserve it. You'll notice that the colors are going past my lines. And I like that. So that it won't be too well defined. Will have a certain hazy effect, which I really like. I'm using very light colors first now because I'm still establishing the highlights. If I go to stronger colors, I will not be able to recover the lightness of those areas. So I have to be careful not to remove or destroy those highlights. I've learned to aspire for a looser way of painting. For me, it achieves a certain painterly effect. Now, you notice that the water went through, so I just have to live with that. If something like that happens, while it's wet, you can still tap it with your tissue, or sometimes you can just leave it and see what happens afterwards. Now I've completed the first layer, which is basically the light areas. And I'm trying to take advantage of areas which are still damp to achieve certain effects, basically a soft effect in terms of edges. It's nice to have them in your painting. I've learned through the years that an important aspect really of painting is also tone, or the relative lightness or darkness of the different areas of your painting. This quality that will give your painting depth, will give the illusion of volume, space, distance, will help you capture your subject, the reality of your subject. As I'm going forward here, I'm slowly going darker and darker, but I'm trying to reserve those whites because really the white, the lighter areas of your watercolor painting are what will give the vitality to your work. If I, for example, do this, you will see the color and the darkness slowly spread around. And these are the things that are gifts of the medium. Sometimes I'm able to anticipate or predict what will happen, but sometimes I don't. And that's also for me the fun of it. I try to judge the dampness of the paper by looking at the side. If there is a sheen, a white sheen, that means it's very wet yet. I can also feel whether it's damp. The business we started had to do with growing specialty vegetables for restaurants. In the process, I'd see the restaurant during their off times. I'd see the restaurants still very well ordered. The image of those restaurants stuck with me. So when I decided to go full-time to art, I decided to have as my theme the restaurant interiors, or what I call restaurantscapes. So this featured basically the interior of the restaurant and also the tables that they had. I just like the idea of still lifes, and the idea of putting plates also gave another dimension because it suggested the idea of gathering or of people eating together. Now I'm building the color and the tone of the painting. So I'm taking one by one each of the major shapes, each of the ceramic pieces. This stage really you're building color, you're building the tone or the relative darkness. You establish your shadow areas. And I think by doing this, you slowly create the painting itself. As the variety of dark and light areas continues to build, then you'll feel the painting really taking shape. The thing with watercolor is, since it's water-based, part of the challenge and part of what you have to do is sometimes let the water, the paper dry before you continue working on a certain area. In a larger sheet of paper like what I'm using, I could also devote my time to other areas while I'm waiting for certain areas to dry. To the advanced stages, I like to do this more like a loose kind of way of painting, not exactly the same as the subject, but because it's loose, I find that the effect is something I like. how light is captured, how light is shown. In a way, it's not the object itself, and yet it is part of the object. To see light captured in a painting is one of my joys, really. Not just as a painter, but also just as someone interested in art. It's also nice to hold the brush towards the tip. It makes your strokes more relaxed, more, I think the term is more painterly. Make use of the way water diffuses the color. So I think the greatest role an artist can fulfill is really to continue to convey hope to others by probably showing the beauty of that is around us, or by expressing certain truths to their art. I think that's worthwhile. I've tried to start doing the plates. This involved seeing where the colors suddenly become more intense, and by trying to capture those shifts, hopefully you are able to show the plate. I like to soften the edges so that they don't distract. So with watercolor, it's easy to soften the edge. You can use a tissue paper. You can also wet your brush and go to the edges to soften them. It's easy to do in watercolor as long as the pigment is still wet. Once it dries, it's going to take extra effort to remove those hard edges, and sometimes it's already impossible. Or in trying to soften the edge, you might be damaging your painting also. Okay, so I've more or less touched the 5 major objects in the painting. Now I will slowly go to the other things, the flowers and the utensils. And then I'll go back to those major shapes later. Sometimes while one area is drying, I can go back to the other spots. I have to make sure I'm looking at the subject, and this is a bit free-flowing. Sometimes we get confused what's next. I think the answer always to that is go back to your subject. Just look at it, examine it some more, and it will give you more keys as to what you will have to do next. Key also to trying to capture that softness in things like petals is to start very light. Again, I soften the edges. Start very light so that you slowly build your color with succeeding layers. A lot also of watercolor is mixing your paint. It's really about practice. It's also about having growing knowledge and familiarity with color theory, which is basically how do you mix colors, like what are your primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, and how do you mix orange? It is basically a combination of yellow and red. You also should learn how to mute them or to reduce their intensity when necessary. So part of mixing your colors is knowing also when to reduce their intensity, the saturation of the color, or what we call chroma. It's also about learning to combine what we call warm colors, or colors that have more yellow and red, with cooler colors, which basically have blue. And if you alternate these kinds of colors, you create a certain vibration or a certain effect in your work that's so pleasing to your eyes. It makes your colors more vibrant. If I could recommend something very much, it's to paint from the actual objects, paint from life, to paint outdoors as much as possible, or do plein air painting. Because for me, these activities are in themselves your teachers. You learn faster because you're more in touch with your subject. You can see the actual colors in life, and it hastens your development in being able to mix your colors, judging your tones and your colors. You learn these faster if you paint from life. Sometimes you can play with the dryness of your brush so that you can simulate certain textures. I find these jars to contain several colors within themselves, so I like trying to capture those colors. Another quality that you want to have in your painting is to have harmony, but the colors are not so different from each other. I think the reason for that is it's the same light that hits them. And the quality of that light is the one that determines the actual color of all these objects. I'm continuing to build the color in certain areas of the objects, and you'll notice that what it does is that it creates that shadow, the shadow of that area. While the other parts are still drying, I'm going to try something. I'm going to try to define the background. I'll wet the paper again. And here I let the paper and the water do its thing, you know? Let it show its own properties. And by doing this also, I define certain highlights. You'll notice that the white of the jar, the tip is more pronounced since I'm creating contrast. I'd like to make the background not too distracting, but not too plain also, so I can play around with this. You'll notice in this jar, I could not define the opening that much. But now by putting the background, I can define the lip more because I create that contrast. By using also a broader brush, like this flat brush, I'm able to cover more ground than with a smaller brush. The jars at the back are relatively dark, so I will not be able to create contrast if I make the background also dark. So I will still keep it light, but I'd like to add some texture also to the background. I don't have to be that faithful to the actual background. I can play around with this. And the objective is to highlight the arrangement itself. I like to add colors to the background, but I don't want it to be distracting. So I want the colors to mix with each other so that they create a more neutral color that won't distract from the table setting itself. Some basic techniques also to mute the color is to put its opposite. I want to move now back to the flowers to hopefully define the shape some more. I'm trying to create the impression of the design of the jar, these pieces that are jutting out. Here, for example, I let the color blend to the background and it creates a soft effect that for me is nice. At the same time, by making this dark, I highlight the light area of the ceramic jar. I feel sometimes that I've already ruined the painting. And it helps when I tell myself it's already failed, so I might as well play with it. Frees up, relaxes me. And sometimes I come up with something that's also still nice. Sometimes I can salvage the painting or come up with something that I did not also expect, but that turned out also well. I wanted to define the table, but sometimes what happens here is it's so well defined, the edges are, for me, too hard. I want to soften the edges, again, by moistening the edge. I've more or less finished the major shapes, ano? So the detail na lang, yung utensils. I'd like to add some texture to the background, and sometimes you just play around doing this. Sometimes you can also wet the paper this way. And the idea is to create more texture so that it contrasts with the main subject. Now I'm going to the detail of the forks and spoons and knives. So that's when my detail brush will be handy. I have to work with a very dry surface or else the color will just spread out. So I have to make sure that where I'm painting is very dry. So it's not exactly an accurate depiction of the utensils, but the important thing is you suggest it. So what I'm trying to do now is build again my darkest darks so that I define the lighter areas. So I work on the shadows, and by doing so, I define even the areas, the shapes of those that are around what I'm painting. The details, I use a brush with a finer point. It's also a chance to put some calligraphy into the work that makes it also, again, more painterly. Allows me to do more lines. I'm going to put blue on the painting. And because I will leave some places white, I will define, for example, the utensils by painting around them. Instead of painting white, you allow the white of the paper to come out. It has a certain luminosity that's, for me, really very satisfying. What creates a painting is light and shadow. While this has color, if I define more the lights, the highlights and the shadows, it will make the painting come further into life. For me, having the flowers a bit hazy and soft makes it more mysterious and also visually appealing for me. Task of the artist also is to choose where to devote more detail and where to suggest. Part of the artist's work also is to lead the eye of the viewer. So you also try to lead them into what you call a focal point. I want to define the table a bit. So with the light wash, I'd like to create a more well-defined edge. And then the other edge, I try to diffuse the background so that you don't see that edge. And then with the tissue, I can soften certain edges so that it's not monotonous. There is a variation in the edge. The light is coming here, so the shadow is somewhere here. If I hold the brush tightly, I can show these shapes more freely, more loose, and I think the effect is better.
Hope you had a delightful time with the master artist Gerardo Jimenez. Let's all give him a round of applause or send out heart or clap reactions. So are there questions that you would like to ask Mr. Jejo? You're in luck. We can entertain a few questions addressed to Mr. Jejo. So send them via chat, comments, or the Q&A feature for those on Zoom. So perhaps I think the most urgent question to ask is about the medium. What materials, painting implements do you need to start watercolor painting? And what are your tips for those planning to begin watercolor painting?
Thank you, Carlo Mar. First of all, I'd like to greet those who are listening in. I'd like to thank also you, Carlo Mar, and Pinto Art Museum, as well as the Department of Foreign Affairs for this opportunity to share what I know in watercolor painting. Now to your question of what materials would be needed. Well, first we need a very important component is the paper. If you're a beginner, then more or less any paper will do. But as you gain experience, you will discover that there are certain kinds of paper that are better to use. Like, for example, I use a kind of paper which is 100% cotton. Mm-hmm. So you can say that it's actually not paper anymore. It's like cloth. It's 100% cotton. It's the thickness is 300 GSM. But what I want to say is the quality of the paper is very important. Another thing is the sturdiness of the paper. If you go back to a certain area repeatedly, with a good quality paper, it can handle those repeated returns to it. Whether you lift color or you scratch or anything, it can withstand what you're doing. The next part, of course, is the pigment. There are many levels of watercolor pigments in the market. There are some which are student grade, mainly usually this is what we started with when we were in grade school. They're more affordable. You can start with them right away. But of course, there's a certain limitation in their quality over time. And then again, as you gain experience, as you gain a deeper appreciation for what the materials can do, then you go more to the student grade materials and then to the artist grade materials. We're very fortunate now that in the market there are several brands available. I remember when I was only starting to become more active in watercolor painting, there was practically one brand available. Now there are several. So the choices are varied. That's also the same with paper. Then the next is your brush. You can use even just one brush to paint. But as you strive to achieve certain effects, then you start to experiment with other kinds of brush. There is the detail brush which can make a very fine line. You can have a flat brush which can cover a lot of area right away with pigment. And then you have what you call a round brush. Basically, those are the three: the detail, the round, and the flat brush. We also use a pencil to make our initial sketch. And that's basically it. Next is really the water, which you can get anywhere. And with that, you can basically start painting already.
So, with regard to the choice of medium, I'm just curious, why did you choose watercolor as your medium? Did you try exploring other media such as oil or acrylic, or watercolor was really your first love?
I trace my use of watercolor from the time I was still a young boy. I remember using the watercolor without anyone encouraging me to do so. So maybe there was that natural interest. Also, watercolor is very convenient. It's very portable. You don't need the solvents like linseed oil or let's say turpentine, which can first of all they're also toxic. They're harder to manage or harder to clean. So watercolor was very portable and easy to handle for me. But as I got to know it more, then I also began to really appreciate its qualities. The quality really is for me, how it can depict light. By using the white of the paper, you're able to depict the light in your paintings. And I've started to actually paint in oil. But for me, how light can be depicted in watercolor cannot be matched by the other mediums. There's also the quality of its being, to a certain extent, a challenge to control.
Mm-hmm.
Since water is, you have to judge the relative moisture of your paper, of your brush, of your pigment, and it's hard to predict 100% accurately how these elements will manifest themselves in the paper. There is if you'd want to control all of those things, I'd say you're going to come up with a very stiff painting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think the magic of watercolor is testing these uncharted waters. In a sense, it's like a medium that you should not tame completely.
Mm-hmm.
Because when all these other things that you were not able to predict happen on your paper, they turn out to be really, really beautiful sometimes. Sometimes, of course, they can be disasters.
Yeah.
But that's also the fun of it. I think art is, I heard somewhere, art is skill plus risk.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that in watercolor. You need the skill, but you always have to take the risk also.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a combination of those two. And I find that very much in watercolor. And that's the charm for me.
Yeah. You mentioned something about having a sense of control and also having a sense of risk in deploying the medium. There's a question here from Lizzie Haji Marali that connects to that statement. Hi, Mr. Gerardo. My name is Lizzie. I would first like to say thank you for teaching us how to paint with watercolor. My question is, how do you stop being anxious when painting with watercolor? I usually find myself overpainting a watercolor artwork if it doesn't look like how I expect it to be. So, how do you tame that sense of the anxiety? Because there's a chance for certain accidental passages to emerge as you paint.
Well, first of all, thank you, Lizzie, for your question. And as far as that anxiety is concerned, let me tell you that you are not alone. I think in art in general, but in particular in watercolor, that is always there. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes it art. If it's sure to work, if you're sure you're going to come up with a masterpiece all the time, then I'd say maybe it's not art anymore. I think art is really taking that chance, doing something that has not been done right away before, or something you have never done before. And since it's not something you already know, there is always that anxiety. And I also believe that that anxiety is also what makes it possible for you to get better, because it's like that inner critic within you. However, just like the medium that we have to tame to a certain extent, we also have to tame that certain anxiety. Mm-hmm. I had an artist who told me before, he said, "What are you afraid of? It's just paper." Mm-hmm. So if you make a mistake, then no problem. You can just do another one. You don't really lose much. In fact, sometimes I've experienced in painting, when I reach that point when I say, I think this is already a disaster. Mm-hmm. It's already a failed painting. And then I'll just play with it afterwards. In a way, I'm able to tame that anxiety and I get more relaxed and I actually salvage the painting. Sometimes I come up with something I've never come up with before. So I think that anxiety is always there. It's good to have it there. Mm-hmm. Or else we're going to say we had very good work and then actually it's not so good. It's that critic which also gives us that quality. And to assert, in a sense, you dance with that anxiety. Mm-hmm. Not in the sense that you know what to do, but precisely that you don't know what's going to do. You respond to that anxiety. You respond to your work and you see what happens afterwards.
That's beautiful. What I'm getting is that embrace the uncertainty. It may be part of the process, and it may lead you towards places that you have not even imagined when you conceptualize what to paint initially. So, and that's the beauty of watercolor. It allows you that sense of experimentation and risk, and just being, just expressing yourself, as opposed to say other mediums that are pretty much that are very strict. Once you lay down the pigment, for instance, of course you can fix it, but the more you fix it, sometimes it becomes worse. But with what Jejo has mentioned, perhaps those mistakes lead you to beautiful discoveries, and that's something that the medium of watercolor offers you.
So if I may add to that, Carlo Mar, sometimes these constraints, the constraint of the medium, it acts wild when it's wet. You have the limitation of the paper. It can only handle so much. These constraints sometimes are the ones that give you the energy. Mm. Sometimes the constraint of time, the constraint you only have an hour to finish it, and sometimes these give you the energy to come up with something that's going to be nice or fresh, or maybe not perfect. Maybe that's actually what we want. Maybe that's art. It's the perfection of being perfect.
There's another question. It's from JV Totanias Visorma. I've been following watercolor master classes in Holland, but you are different. Clear and honest explanation, which any level will easily understand. Well done. I'm painting outdoor too. Through with what you said lately, you learn faster from direct observation, from tones, shapes, and values. and it's there already. You just have to paint it. My question is, do you like gouache, watercolor?
First of all, thank you for your kind words. Many Dutch masters are my models, also are my idols. So, and I learned from them, and I think learning is really from many sources. For gouache, it's very much like watercolor. It's water based. I think the difference is it's opaque. Some people mix both watercolor and gouache. However, in my case, I've found a preference to using the natural opacity of the different pigments, because some watercolor pigments have their own opaqueness or opacity up to a certain level. So I try to use the natural opacity without using gouache, and I find also that leaving the white of the paper would be better. I find the results more appealing for myself. This is a personal thing. I find that more pleasant or more satisfying for me than using, let's say, for example, a gouache that's white, to put white in the paper. So it's a preference, And I've seen artists who have combined watercolor and gouache. I've seen artists who use gouache. In the end, I think it's in a sense, it's the weapon you're more attuned to or you prefer. And it's really different for different kinds of people. So if you like gouache, great, go. That's good.
Another question. Hi, sir. What essential colors do you keep in your watercolor palette?
I remember when I was a child watching a video in school of a Chinese artist who was just using 3 colors, blue, red, and yellow. Similar to what we have in our printers. You only have those primary colors, sometimes black. But with those 3 colors, you could already have the effect of really a myriad of different colors. So it can be as basic as having that. But in my regular palette, I have around 18 colors. It's basically 2 to 3 variations of the primaries, which are the red, yellow, and blue. And then 1 or 2 of the secondaries. So let's say for green, I have Viridian, for example, just to give you an idea of the name. So Viridian is a cool green. And then I have what we call, sometimes it's sap green or bamboo green for a warmer kind of green. But generally, my secondary is 1. And that's basically it. I have some neutral colors, like let's say yellow ochre, etc. But I try to use more the transparent primaries and try to mix from that. And I think it's a very nice skill to develop in watercolor, being able to mix. And I think the more skillful you are, the more experience you gain, the more you're able to mix the color you want from very few colors. In fact, it's best to only use 2 or 3 colors in one mixture, or else you have a certain muddiness already. You lose the brilliance of the colors if you want the brilliance to come out. So it can be 6 colors, which I usually use in a painting, but you can have an arsenal of maybe 18. Sometimes the more you have, the more confusing it is, and you also sacrifice a certain harmony in your work if you're using too many colors.
Yeah, and also what I'm getting from what you said earlier, honor the white page, the whiteness of the page. That's also something that you can play to your advantage, aside from the pigments that you will use. Perhaps
if I may add to that, my dear friend and one of my idols in watercolor painting, a local artist named Erwin Malyari, says it best, and I quote him. He says, the white portions of your painting are the jewels of your painting. So to what you're saying, Carlo Mar, of honoring the white, they are the jewels, they are the gems of your painting.
Um, so thank you for that. We'll end this Q&A with this very fitting question because it talks about the future of the watercolors medium. From Marvin Balkos of Vienna, Austria, thank you for showing us your skill. In your opinion, what's the future of Filipino contemporary art using watercolor as medium in the Philippines and in the international setting?
That's a nice question to answer. Also, I'd say in any medium, in anything in our world, it's going to be the person who uses it who will chart its future. I think if the artist, really not an artist, but this community of artists, and really art is a collaborative thing. It is watercolor painting is not just one person. The richer it is, just like culture, the more diverse, the more pluralistic, the more people who practice it, the more people really devote themselves into the medium. That is going to that is going to chart the future of watercolor. And really, if we think about it, watercolor has been there for several centuries. And the properties of watercolor compared to the other mediums will continue to have the differences. So it really, the possibilities are always there, as long as the artists are able to use it and they do it well. I know people will appreciate it more. As far as there's also an issue sometimes, for me, a mistaken notion that if it's paper based, if it's watercolor, then watercolor paintings don't last. And I don't think this is true. My paintings from 20 years ago have stayed the same, and materials have continued to improve. So if they have lasted so long before, the watercolors of Turner have lasted centuries, and now we have even better quality. So even the issue of whether watercolor or paper-based art will survive over time, I think that for me that has already been answered, and they will stand the test of time. So I think the future is bright, but because I believe there will be this community of artists who will continue to bring life to it. And because of that, more people will appreciate watercolor art.
Thank you for that answer. Just want to address this. It's about the watercolor painting lessons at the Pinto Museum. We don't currently offer, but please follow us in our social media accounts, Facebook and Instagram. We will announce there if ever we have painting sessions, particularly featuring Mr. Gerardo Jimenez. He did one in connection to an exhibition that we had featuring French and Philippine diplomacy. So that's where we met, and hopefully, who knows, in the future we'll be able to invite him again. On that note, thank you, Judge. Yeah.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not
please.
part of this organization, but we have a Philippine watercolor guild, so they can also look for the Philippine Watercolor Guild if they'd like to learn more. They're actually going to have a convention starting this Saturday, so you can search them in Facebook if you'd like to know more. While there is none in Pinto Museum.
Yeah. All right. So thank you once again for generously sharing us your time as well as your creative process in the earlier video. So we highly appreciate it. So ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jejo Jimenez.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Carlomar.
So if you missed any part of the workshop, that's all right. You can watch and revisit this workshop on the DFA Facebook page and YouTube channel. We would also like to remind everyone that you can submit your artworks inspired by the workshop or created from the workshop not later than November 14 of this year. So all of those who have been inspired by Mr. Jejo Jimenez, this is your time to actually showcase your works in this online exhibition. You can, of course, use watercolor or any art medium that you are comfortable with. These artworks, if you're lucky, may be featured in our virtual gallery, which will be launched next month. You may send your artwork through the QR code flashed on the screen, so it's there now, or through our Philippine embassies and consulates general. Visit and stay tuned on the DFA Facebook page to know more about the artwork submissions. So now, this is what we have been waiting for to officially launch the most awaited part of this program, the gamified 360 virtual tour of Pinto Art Museum. May we call on someone who is a respected neurologist, who also happens to be the owner and founder of Pinto Art Museum, Dr. Joven Quanang. Let us give him a round of applause.
Welcome to the Pinto Art Museum. I would like to welcome you in behalf of the Board of Directors as well as our management. This month is Museum and Galleries Month, and we are celebrating this very important occasion with a 360-degree virtual experience tour of the Pinto Art Museum. For those who have been here, this is a new experience. But for those who have not visited, this is going to be a fitting introduction to an experience of witnessing the offerings of Pinto with regard to our collection of contemporary art of the Philippines. So I would like to thank you for coming, for seeing this particular exhibit, and to thank the Office of the Public and Cultural Diplomacy of the Department of Foreign Affairs and their partners for this particular project. I know that with this project, we will be able to project what Filipino art looks like to the rest of the world. Thank you.
We'd like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Joven Quanang. He's actually in the room with us. So hello, Manong. So thank you for allowing this collaboration to happen. And thank you also for officially launching the Pinto, a 360-degree virtual experience tour. We also would like to thank the Department of Foreign Affairs through the Office of Public and Cultural Diplomacy Division for this partnership and for showcasing Philippine contemporary art and for forging a positive image of Philippine culture and arts to our international audiences. Not to mention for rekindling the fire within every Filipino to appreciate and love our rich and diverse culture. Now, I know that we are all excited to access the virtual tour, but we would like for you to enjoy and have a great experience. So we prepared a quick walkthrough video of the tour.
This October, the Department of Foreign Affairs joins the celebration of Museums and Galleries Month. This 2022, we are shining the spotlight on one of Antipolo's most popular destinations, the country's doorway to Philippine contemporary art, the Pinto Art Museum. Join us in exploring Pinto Art Museum's gardens and galleries with its many paintings, sculptures, and installations within the comfort of your home. Are you up for a challenge? Join the Search Artworks game by clicking on the puzzle icon and get the chance to win amazing prizes. Search the walls of Pinto's different galleries for the 30 artworks that strongly depict this year's MGM theme: solidarity, hope, and recovery. Find all 30 artworks for a chance to win cool prizes. Celebrate the Museums and Galleries Month with us through the Pinto 360 Degrees Gamified Virtual Tour and experience how very much alive the arts in the Philippines is. Immerse yourself in contemporary Philippine art here at Pinto Art Museum.
Wow, so thank you for that walkthrough of the virtual tour. I'm sure this video got you even more excited. It's very accessible, and exciting prizes await those who will accomplish the virtual tour. And it's also a good experience for those who have not yet visited the Pinto Art Museum as a way to introduce the welter of artworks that constitute the collection of the museum. We would like to acknowledge and extend our gratitude to our partner media production agency for this project, Excite 360 Media Productions, who assisted us in mounting this project. So the virtual walkthrough, the tour, that was the responsibility of Excite 360 Media Productions. So thank you to them. So now, to conclude this event, we call on the Assistant Secretary of the Office of Public and Cultural Diplomacy, ASEC Eduardo Martin R. Menyes.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to our audiences all over the world. On behalf of the Department of Foreign Affairs, the Office of Public and Cultural Diplomacy, in particular, the Cultural Diplomacy Division, and in partnership with the Pinto Art Museum, headed by Dr. Joven Quanang, I thank you all for joining us, and I hope that this afternoon's series of activities has broadened your imagination of what the power of art can do and inspired you to be immersed in the beauty of art. Technology has truly been a gift that allows us to connect in a new way, not just with others, but also with ourselves and even with intangible concepts such as the power of art. Now, with the help of innovation, we can once again safely and comfortably, vicariously experience art and culture through this, the Pinto, a 360-degree virtual art experience tour. Pinto Art Museum is one of its kind in the Philippines. As the Pinto, or door to Philippine contemporary art, it houses, amidst lush gardens and galleries that combine the wonders of nature and art, the artworks of contemporary Filipino artists. Thus, the museum not only provides a haven for nature lovers and art enthusiasts, but also gives a space for all Filipino contemporary artists to showcase their talent. Pinto Art Museum, founded in 2010, is thus instrumental in making contemporary art flourish and be known to the world. In a very special way, the department thanks Pinto Art Museum and Dr. Quanang for welcoming our audiences from all over the world and accommodating them to explore your amazing museum and introducing them to the world of Philippine contemporary art. We extend our sincerest gratitude for allowing our team to showcase Pinto Art Museum. It is our hope that this virtual experience opens more doors and avenues to put Philippine art on a higher pedestal on the world stage. This immersive experience also aims to entice interest in Philippine art. As borders open up and as travel restrictions become more relaxed, there is no greater way to experience the vastness of Philippine art, heritage, and culture than to be here in the country. The Department of Foreign Affairs, along with its partner agencies and the Pinto Art Museum, invite all of you to visit the Philippines and explore what it offers firsthand. We hope that this cultural diplomacy project will help bridge ideals and opinions, transcending distance, race, age, and different perspectives, and allow us to embrace uncertainty through solidarity, hope, and recovery. Let us open our Pinto, our doors to the world, and be inspired by different cultures and arts. Let us learn, explore, come together, and be open to new ideas that widen our worldview, enhance our understanding of our interconnectedness, and enliven our experience through art and culture. Mabuhay and happy Museums and Galleries Month.
Thank you, ASEC at Manyas. Again, we invite everyone to experience Pinto Art Museum like never before through a gamified 360-degree virtual experience. This tour is currently viewable on Xsite's 360's website. You may access it by scanning the QR code on the screen. You may also access the 360 gamified virtual tour by visiting the DFA Facebook page. To our audiences here in the Philippines, we also invite you to the current and upcoming exhibits and events at Pinto Art Museum, such as the show Air to the Loom by Marina Cruz, who painted heirloom Inabel fabrics. Again, this is Carlo Mardawana on behalf of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Pinto Art Museum. We thank you for joining us and for allowing us to share with you a glimpse of Philippine contemporary art and, of course, Pinto Art Museum. Today, art not only inspired and healed us, it also brought us together as one. Let art be our source of hope and inspiration. Again, we wish you a happy Museums and Galleries Month. We look forward to seeing all of you here in the Philippines. Thank you, everyone, and mabuhay.
Recording stopped.
Thank you po.
Salamat sa inyo lahat. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Salamat.
Thank you.
Hi, Christina. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you po.
Salamat. Really appreciate it. Sige, I'll leave na. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Alexis, thank you.
Bye.
Good job, Carlo.
Thank you, Sir Sergio, Sir Carlo.
Bye.
Thank you. Carlo Mar, thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much, Miss
Hope to
Jen.
meet you
everyone.
someday in
Everyone.
face to face.
Yeah.
It was really a
Yes.
beautiful event.
Thank you.
Congratulations to everyone.
Congratulations,
Congratulations.
DFA.
Congratulations.
Bye.
Enjoy the rest of the day.
You too. Bye-bye.